So let's see what we have done so far. So we have created handle. We have seen how to actually handle interactions. Using the actions and event kind of thing that we learned. Also, we saw how you can accept user inputs and how you can match AMP components to to your desired requirements, whatever you're trying to build, and how to combine different components together. So some of you have also submitted a AMP sidebar with accordion. Liked it very much. So you have been like finally figured out how to combine different components to get the desired results. So I don't know your name, PRC, but I'll read your question. I'm facing tag amp accordion is disallowed as child of tag. Yeah, I told you guys that amp accordion is the master tag. So nav has to be inside amp accordion if you are trying to put nav. And always, if you have any kind of problem related to this, amp validator always take you to the back to the documentation. So don't worry about that. Always check out the documentation. You will find the answers there. Okay, so what we're gonna see today, like what we have built so far. First of all, let's cover up this. So we have created a slide out navigation bar on site that works with the actions trigger that we have created. Then we also created a newsletter registration form, and then we also created a thumbnails carousel of how it looks like on click of thumbnail, how the image should look like. And then we finally discovered image lightbox, which is unique because lightbox usually takes a lot of time to code. So this is pretty much the easiest way to put any light box. So that's what we have already covered, and this is a unique like looking thing which would have taken a lot of JavaScript and HTML to code, but we did it with small usage of components, right guys? So but everything that we have done so far is the same component. There is no dynamicity in there, like but the sites that you see day to day are dynamic sites. So the difference between dynamic site and a simple site is that dynamic site changes data every time a person loads it, like an e-commerce website or Netflix or Facebook. So how to store data of newsletter in database like Firestore. So I'll be talking about how to connect to API today only. One of the way that I think some of you asked me the question. So there is a link of action XHR forms with the action SHR forms with AMP forms. So you can check that section that has the answer to how to send data to any of the backend. So I have problem with AMP images. Please let me know what problems you had. I will definitely help you in that thing. Yeah, if there is a problem, there is a solution. Depends how you fix it. So and oh my god, software update, I don't need it. So actions user take on the website takes different dynamic data, and example of dynamic websites are like emails, shopping, social media sites, and news. So all these things are a part of dynamic thing. Like you can see the Mintra shopping app right now over here. I think it's built with AMP. So we are going to see similar thing today, how you can create your own application with custom variables, state changing variables, so that you can manipulate data. Also, you will see how you can retrieve data from the server using templates and then dynamically change the content on the screen. So this is all what we are going to see today, like the pretty cool stuff of creating web apps and how AMP can help you do that. So what we will build a e-commerce like site. First of all, we are going to revisit the AMP carousel. So last time in the AMP carousel, we just put the thumbnails, but this time we are going to put slide 2 of 3 numbers like that on the bottom. So these numbers will help us understand which slide we are on, which is a pretty good feature happening these days on the website. So we'll use again a principle like managing state variables, and also we'll build a e-commerce website where we will offer different filters, and depending upon these filters, different data will show up on the screen. So pretty much like the last part of actually web, where we need to know about the interaction side. So what we'll build today, we'll build 2 examples, popular examples. One is a video site like YouTube. So the data will be fetched from a backend server, and then we'll also build a online shopping app that will contain different filters to manipulate how the data is viewed on the front end. So prerequisites for today: so normal HTML, CSS, little bit of JavaScript you should know, and you should know JSON. So I'll wait for like 10 seconds. If you guys already know JSON, it's good. If nobody, like if somebody doesn't know, you can ask me. I can explain you. Okay, so a little bit about JSON. It's just the way JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a way of interacting with the front end and back end application. So that's what we are going to use in order to manipulate data on our front end, which is coming from the backend server. So remember what the user has done already. He's doing like putting simple kind of components, like doing simple kind of things like expand all button, checking box, and things like that. Yeah, so I already explained what JSON is. CSS is custom style sheet, so the way to style it, and JSON is JavaScript object notation, how you actually talk with your front end and back end. So we are going to see an example, and it will pretty much clear you what actually we mean by using JSON and things like that, and we'll get into it. So these are the different actions. As you can see, you may use expand all button, use a tick box, show hide option, things like that. So we are going to create this different things. Now, any part of any like application that we create, the most important part is storing data inside variables. Now, variables, what are variables? Variables are like temporary storage of data. You can store pretty much anything, numbers, string, URL, paragraphs, pretty much anything you want to store, you have to use variables inside JSON. So this is like a basic programming. I won't get too much into it, what variables are, how to store it. But like you need to know a little bit about variables, how to manipulate them. So JSON has everything as a nested object inside them. And you have to retrieve these values in order to show them on the screen. So we'll also see a live example of how that thing is done. So whenever a variable is updated, the code sees the variable and also it updates whatever the thing has to be on the screen. So this is the same thing we can do with our websites, and that's what we are going to do. So we are going to see that this expand all accordion with one click, or how all accordions can expand, and simple accordions can expand and retrieve in a single column, but how you can expand all accordions. So in this kind of example, you will see how we are going to use two things that are amp state and amp bind. So state variable are basically states of different divs. Imagine it as like traffic lights. If traffic is stopped, then the state is red light, and if the traffic is going on, then the state is green light. So imagine these as the same thing inside your web component. State actually help you identify how your particular application is looking, like a state, like what is the current state of that DOM and how you can manipulate it. And then the second thing is binding, and with this state, how the component changes, this effect is called a binding. Like for example, if I click this button, red light grows. So this way of this action happening is actually binding. And amp uses two things called as amp state and amp binding, which we will learn this in this session, which helps us to manipulate and create dynamic websites. So firstly, we'll look into amp state, which is the way of storing information in application. Now imagine a scenario where you are, using effect like this, using a click me button, and you need a variable which should have a starting value, and every time you click this button, the value of this increases. So this is a classic example of how a state variable works, and this is the code implementation that we are going to implement. That is, we have created a button, and on the button we have a tab, and the am.set state was pressed true. This is the state that we are setting. So let's go through the little bit of instruction that they have presented over here. So set state is used to actually set state, and this format is actually the JSON format. So you use set state, and then you pass the parameter as JSON inside, the state, so that was pressed is turned back to true. So this is simple example in which you are turning a button into true whenever a button is getting clicked. Let's go in the playground and let's see this thing in action. Playground. So amp state. Okay. So here is a classic example. You can see there is a you know uh, input field. If you can see my screen, let me zoom it a little bit. So there is an input screen which has this amp state action listener. So this is one of the action listener that is input throttled amp. So you can look into more kind of different kind of action listeners. This is one of the input that actually checks for keystrokes whenever we are typing something on the keyboard. So this is the action listener. Then we are using the colon. Then we are telling amp that use this function set state to do this thing. So what this do this thing means that if the character set is the value of the input. If this event dot value dot length is less than 10, then you should print there are under 10 characters, or if it is more than 10, then there are more characters than 10. So this is how we are actually managing simple input field, and then we are responding it in this. So how it is actually this is what we will learn in the upcoming thing, how we actually change the text inside this. So this is a paragraph parameter which is char state, and then we have used event dot value dot length. So it means that with this event, go to this char state and change the value of this thing to whatever it is written over here. So if we change something and write over here, it says we have typed more than 10 characters, and if we go back, it writes it has less than 10 characters. We will go into detail how I'm like showing this thing, but for right now, just to check, the on state is actually so on is equal to this event that you want to listen, then the name of the function you want to trigger. This is what you should know for now, and then we will learn about more things later. So this is what the same thing is happening. So there are different ways of you can merge different states. And for example, this is our current state, that is the default state that was already there. Like button click count is a variable and we have set it to 1. And this is another kind of variable which is a boolean variable, is accordion is equal to true. In JSON you don't need to define the data types of the variable, you just need to define the variable and the default value it automatically picks up, if it's string or if, integer, float, whatever you want to put it over here. You don't need to declare them. Is char set the name of the text box? So char set is not the name, it is I think the ID. Let me go back to the playground. So yeah, this is a text manipulator. I will be talking about this later, how this particular statement is used in order to show different types of data. So sure, Mayank, I will explain a little bit about AMP forms again if you want, and we'll be using AMP forms again in this way also. So no problem, you can understand it during this session also. So this is our current state, different articles written over here, and this is what we want to be the final state. So how we will change the state from this one? We run a function on. So there is an event happening in the left side, and then am.setState is changing this button click dot count from 1 to 2, and this is how the current state is changing to the final state. Simple way of doing things. This is the current state, this is the change that you want to make, and this is the final state. Cool. I hope this part is clear. So now, whenever you want to create any application like this, you want to set a default value of the character that you want to create. So everything is stored inside as a JSON, and if you want to set a default, for example, you want to make all the accordions in close state in the initial go. So how you will do that? In the head section, you can use amp state, this tag, and then the ID is required so that you can manipulate the data inside that amp state. And then you have to use the script tag, user type as application or JSON. So this is the norm of using the script tag inside this. And then you have to create your variable, the default, and set the default value of the variable. So in this case, is open is equal to false, which automatically means that is open is a boolean variable and the default value is set to false. So this is how you set the initial value. And then when, for example, on the click of this button, we want to change the is open to true, let's say. So what we will do, we will click, we will use button on tap. So tap is the event listener over here. Sorry, a tab is the action, and then we are using amp.setState, the setState function, and we are trying to find accordion state, this ID, and then we are manipulating the value of is open to accordion state dot is open. So what this actually statement means that it is trying to get this value of is open. If it is true, it will turn false, and if it's false, it will turn true. So this is what is particularly happening over here. Cool. Any question related to this? Then we will move towards bind. Okay. I'll come back if this is not clear, because this again state thing, we will build a cool thing with this state, and you will explain, like understand more about this in that section. Then the next thing is bind. So now you have manipulated the data, but how do you manipulate the DOM with that data? First thing we did was, whenever something is happening on the DOM, we were changing the data inside our JSON structure. But now when the JSON changes, how we are going to change the DOM? So this we are going to do with something called as bindings. And bind is a default thing that is offered in order to change the state of any kind of DOM elements with respect to the variable that is holding inside that. So this is what is written over here. Let me see if there is something important. Form properties are set to equal an expression in the state variable. Okay, so you want to see a live example of state? Sure, I can show you. So let's go back to the background, and let's say that actually this is a good example already, but let us create a new one. So we will use state, and let's name the variable as something like example. Now, playground is a very good way to do code, because as soon as you type code, it also tells you if it's valid or not. So I will go inside that, use the script tag, and have the type as what? Application / JSON. Close the tag, and then inside this I will create my JSON object. Let's name the object as, let's say we want to change the value of a variable +1 every time we hit a button. Okay, so let's say the name of the variable as I don't think where is allowed. Let's use something like amp. Let's set the default value to 0. So this is we have declared our JSON already. Let's go to button element and on. This is our event listener, amp dot set state, and now we want to run the action. And then we will write the action inside this. Also, let's complete the button first and add a value inside the button. So what we are going to do, we are going to change the set state of example dot amp to example dot amp +1. Okay, and how we are going to see this thing happening? We are going to change. We are, let's create a simple character text box over here. Name to value. So to show this data, we want to use something called as bind. So I'm not sure if okay, I think we can use a template. Let's print the value of example dot Desktop character. Set state should be done. Okay, doesn't work like that. So should be done. Okay, so now we have add one, and when we are clicking add one, this value is coming right over here. So let's go ahead and add +1 over here. Now when we click 1, the value was changed to +1, but that's not actually what we want. We want the value of example.amp state also to change in this scenario, and we will see in amp bind how we can get the data of amp1 and change the state. So to quickly recap what I have done, I have created a button, and on the tab of this button we are changing the state of char set, which is our paragraph right over here, and we are displaying this data on example.amp +1 to this one. Okay, so this is an example of amp state, and I will be like showing how you can change the div again to create a simple +++1 thing in upcoming example. So this basic example we have already done on how to change this thing whenever this message is getting printed. So these are different bindable properties. So let's see this thing what we were talking about, how the text is getting changed. So this is called amp bind properties, and we are going to see what are the different properties that you can change. So every div has different properties like width, height, and property like hidden or maybe manipulating its class. So these are the things that you actually perform with different amp bind states. There are more attributes to this also, but these are like some of the attributes that are listed over here. You can go in detail into amp binds and you can see all the properties that are listed. We can make it like medium claps button. Yes, we can do that too, Raja. Let me try it at the end of the session if I can create an example like that. I'm always performance pressured whenever I'm performing coding in the live. So pardon me for that, but I'll try to, create a live example for you. So these are the different bindable properties, and if you have already seen, so AMP bindable properties are actually kind of dependent upon the AMP component that you are already using. So as we have seen, there are three of these properties like AMP Carousal and AMP Selector and AMP IMG. So you can change these attributes of these properties using AMP bind button. So updating amp binds, binding don't change until the state variable do. So what this actually means that if we have created a JSON and then we want to change the value of this JSON, until this value of JSON is not changed, until then the value of the DOM also doesn't change. So that's what actually this means. So there are some default binding values that you can use, such as class. With this class, you can actually change the class of this thing. So let's also try to create this example. And problem with the presentation is we cannot copy paste, otherwise it would be fun. So let's try to actually do that in the playground. So firstly we were using something called as char set, but this time we will use a class. So this thing that I'm writing in the square bracket is actually the binding to this class. And let's say the default value of this class should be the variable message class. In this case, let's name it name class. So on click of this button, the value of name class change to, let's say, red. So right now it will show null because name class doesn't actually exist, but the class is already created. So let's go to the head and create an amp custom file over here. And let's create a class red. What we're going to do with the class red, we will create a background. Let's see what happens. Okay, am I missing something? Okay, so the red needs to go in inverted commas. See, so what actually we did in this amp binding example, we created a amp set state with which we are changing the name class to red, and we are putting that variable over here, name class. So whatever the name class has it inside this variable, it's changing to this name class. And then we have also defined amp custom style over here, which changes the background to red. Okay, so if I do it again, it won't happen. But let's create something like NOR operator, like we saw in the before example. Let's keep it for the next. So you get the point that if in the default, whenever it loads for the first time, let's create another class over here. Background. Okay, we won't see anything because there is nothing we can do here. Let's write something. Hello. So now two things will be happening. One, the char set value is changing, and the other one is that the class is changing. Hello guys. Maybe I think I lost a connection for a while. So this was a classic example of how you can use the state and bind example. Let's look into some couple of more examples, what you can do. So one thing we see, we can manipulate the class. Then you can also manipulate the text that we actually saw over here in the last example, how we were changing the paragraph text to create that effect. And then we can also change if the property is turning from hidden is equal to, so hidden is a property which you know, let's try that. Hidden, the name of the property that we want to use. For example, if we want to manipulate the value of this prop, it's I think we have to pass true over here. So when we pass, we created a normal variable like prop is equal to true, and this is changing the hidden property to true. That is why this DOM is hiding. So when we click this button, it gets hidden. So this is just three examples: class, text, and hidden property that we used to change our variable from the state that they were existing, and then you can change it to the final outcome. So one also good thing is that inside, whenever you are trying to create a state and whenever you are writing a binding like this, you can add a little bit of custom JavaScript right over here. So this is one of the way to actually execute complex logic or something like that inside your application. So let's see some more examples what you can actually use. You can have input text in which you can change the value of the placeholder. Sorry, this is a classic example in which you can check if the password is same or not. So we have our first input text box, which is named has a property that on change am set state first password that this value, and on this value this property set the state to this one, and then if this default property is hidden, and if the hidden is not true, then this thing will show the password don't match, right? So let's try to actually, do you want me to create this property? Can you please repeat the hidden property? Yeah, let's try to actually create this one. Let me exit the slides and copy this code. So what we'll do, let's erase everything that we have over here. So now we have two boxes, and let's say we add something like, so let me explain the code over here. We have a property named as hidden. What this hidden is doing, this is adding a default value that if this property is not existing, then the hidden will take as. So this is like a fallback to this property. So right now, when we don't have anything inside them, then obviously the value of these two things are equal, right? Something like if we write 10, then it says password don't match. What's the hidden expression? So hidden is a binding, and this hidden is a class. So this hidden is actually equivalent to if you write hidden is equal to true. And what this actually does, the default value is hidden because whenever somebody doesn't write anything, it will be hidden. So when we write over here hello and exit it, it says password don't match. And if we write hello again, values are same, it will compare, and what does the comparison returns? True. So this is actually equivalent to hidden is equal to true over here, and it says password don't match, right? So let's also try to create a simple addition calculator. I think we can do that with this one. So we will change the text of first password plus one. Let's change this hidden is equal to true, and let's change 0. So if I say add 5 over here and 2, okay, so right now it is adding it as string. Let's remove the inverted commas. 5, 2. Right now this is adding it as string. But what we actually need is to change the text to English. I don't know actually. I have to check this how you can. Can write a simple JavaScript. It's not updating for the second value on this. Let me check back again. Okay. Okay. Got it. So new simple inverted commas. Attribute plus second property may not be done. Okay, and then was this was converting text from. I don't know, guys. This thing doesn't work, so I need to check back and I will say. So there are two questions, or if the condition is true, then the message won't appear. Exactly. So we have input type as text, so it's taking string, I guess. Yeah, it's taking string, but I don't know. This is the way actually how you do the operations over here. It's not taking it that way. I'm exactly doing the same. This is the default way of doing it. We have a string, then we convert into a variable, 5, the first password, the second password. No, guys, why this is not happening? Right now, this is adding as like, so plus is, I think, is the sum operator, if I'm not wrong, because they have also used the same operator, but it's working for them somehow. Yeah, let's try the multiply operator. It's a good exercise when I can't like figure out in the first way, and then I get some tips. Okay, so the multiplication operator works somehow. Input type. Oh, haha. Is it the problem? Let's see. 5. 2. No, this is not the problem. I don't know. There is something weird happening with the plus operator. I need to check back again. It's working fine with the multiply. I think it should work fine with the minus also. Let's use 10 minus 2. Yeah, it works fine with the minus also, but with plus it does something weird, right? No, even if you use type number. Well, this is a good remark. I discovered this for the first time. I'm surprised that because nobody writes simple calculator like plus plus, but this plus is somehow concatenating. But they have mentioned in their documentation that we can use the plus operator as normal. So weird, right? Okay, let's move ahead. I'm actually feeling so funny. It's concatenating as strings. Yeah, exactly. But I don't know why it's doing that. Because you can actually add a plus as the operator over here without any problem. It works fine somehow. See, they have used this thing. But anyways, let's go ahead and I'll try this thing again. I will push back in the chat. But we have already wasted 40 minutes, guys, and there is a lot of things left. So let's continue. So we have seen that there can be different things. Like I already tried the password example that works. So let's create. So one of the assignment I think I gave you was that you have carousel and you have thumbnails under it. And yeah, Simmer, it's kind of logical answer error. I don't know what the heck is that. Everything is working except plus. So using state to keep our carousels. So we don't need to define first password and second password because the default value is null, of course, and null is equal to null returns true. Umed, if you have this question. Okay, so we are going to create this carousel kind of thing, and whenever somebody clicks on the particular carousel, it changes the value of the slide which is written down under. So these are a couple of instructions. So what we'll do, we'll set a default value of the selected slide as 0. And this we already seen that how easy it is to set the default value. And then we will create a amp carousel. Again, don't get confused with the snip. It's just another code that will be inside this one. And then we have also created a amp selector. And inside the amp selector, we have different images. Then under it, we have a paragraph which changes the value of slide 1 of 3 and whatever you want to show. So here we again have a concatenating text example which is showing slide carousel dot selected slide plus 1 of the 3. So a simple example how it is changing the value. So let's see this event that they have written. So AMP Carousel has a property, event listening property that has slide change. So this is something, again, it's not, you can use on tap of course, but it's a slide change, user selectors. Yeah. So basically selector on the bottom you are actually using in order to, you know, M selector is actually something like a selecting property of different divs that you want to select. So I'll cover to this part also. But first of all, what do we actually want to do is that if somebody changes the carousel from the arrows of the carousel or from the thumbnails on the bottom, by this, I don't know if it's actually escaping. I don't know. Let's try it later. Actually, I don't want to waste more time in the current session. Will be sorry, I was on that. So if somebody changes the property from the selector or it changes from the carousel, the property should change. So on the selector, we have a event listener called as select, and then am.set state, and then we are changing the value of carousel from selected slide. Right over here we have assigned different IDs to the slides, and we are taking that option and returning back into the selected slide. And as soon as we return back to the selected slide, we are changing this string to the selected slide. So classic example of how you can use amp state and bind together in order to change variables. So now let's see a case study where we have a shopping site. So you might want to create a shopping site, I don't know, for some couple of reasons. And you can use AMP because AMP improves your search results and your site will be hit overnight success. Everybody will be buying clothes from your site maybe. And you would like to use AMP for that, let's say. And you want to create a, you know, a online shirt, cool shirt selling merchandise, something like that. And we want different filters, and whenever somebody change those filters, the data under the whole site actually should change. So this is how it should look like, and this is a default JSON data. This is, I think, the data about the user. So we have created a default user in Bill Smith. Now again, when the person's logins, you can change the value of that user to any value you want. And then we have also created a default value for the cart where we have number of items and also the price of items that we have set. Really, you will add a couple of more things like what items he wants to purchase and things like that. So with this example, let's see what we are actually going to do. We are going to use this button that whenever this person clicks on proceed to checkout, we will get this data from the default state variables and will print it in the cart. So something like we are asking this person to sign in. User dot name should be pulled up from user dot name, and the sign in button should happen. And then we have a total card calculator that is taking the value from here, dividing it by 100 because I think it's not in decimal value, it's divided by 100. So then we are showing the dollar value over here. And when we click on the proceed to checkout button, what is happening? This button is getting disabled. So disabled is again one of the binding properties that you can use. Disable any, like only disabled is there. So disabled true is equal to means the button will be disabled, like faded out in that case. So this is what we are going to use. We have a property that whenever card.items, these items value is 0, so the card button should disable. It's a logical thing, right? So if somebody is not purchasing anything, if he hasn't added anything into the cart, the proceed to checkout button shouldn't show. So this is how you can use the variables to do that. So guys, I'm just like taking you through different examples so that it makes more clear sense of what are different states and binding and how you can actually use them. So these were the thing that we saw, and let's try to create our own product page. I'll try and not to mess the live demos again, so I'll try to show the code, but I don't want to get embarrassed in this time. But let's see what happens. So guys, you might be seeing that we are using this thing in amp state script, and then we are creating this JSON a lot of times, but it's not always the case. You can set up a backend server and you can use a query to fetch your backend data and add them as JSON. Right now we don't have a backend server, that is why we're using plain JSON data. But I would actually try to create like try to find an example where there is an open API and there is a project created with open API. to make it seem it's fun, right? So what is the backend data that is coming from our like backend? For example, we have base price. Then we have I don't know what this upcharges actually means. No idea. But then you have images, different colors of the shirts that are available. That is coming from the backend, so normal JSON data. And what would you actually like to do is that you have a selector, and whenever somebody clicks on the variant of that product, you choose that from product fit, size, and color, and that value is manipulated inside the sample server data that you are trying to, right? Let's see what else in the code is there. You have an amp img. Again, why you would like to change the image, like whenever person changes for a chooses for a different size, you would like to change the image from the backend. So we have product data dot images, again a JSON variable. We created this actually, yeah. So product data dot images, and then whatever variant of shirt you are choosing, the image of that should appear over here. And then you have the fit, where you are choosing for the fit, and then with this all data combined, it is calculating, I'm sorry, so it's calculating all the price and then showing it on the screen, right? A cool example. So let's see how you can actually load data from your server and display it on your screen. Somehow some problem with my keyboard. So let's say this is another example. You want to create a page in which you have different items of sort like this, where you are selling baladi bottle and Gloucester gloves for no reason, but you want to do that, right? So you want to sell bottles and gloves on Chico Cheese Bicycles website. So how would you do that? The nice solution to do that is that you create a plain HTML page and you add every item as an independent div, like create a static page with no reason, like you will end up creating 100 different product pages for AMP. But there is a cool way to do that, right? So what is that solution is using the AMP way. So Mayank, I will get back to your GitHub related issue later. Let me complete the session first. So what actually we want to do with the AMP is, I will actually directly jump to the example. And what we need to do for this is we want to understand how Web API actually works in the beginning. So some of you might already know how Web API works. So Web API, imagine it is like there is a backend which gives you data back whenever you hit an endpoint. So is there anyone who actually don't understand API? Otherwise, I will just skip this section of just simple brief, like backend, you're getting data from backend. That's it. So imagine it is like folders, and then whatever API you are hitting, you are getting back the data. So in our case, let's imagine the data is coming from an API named as some URL dot slash data dot JSON. So this is the endpoint that is serving us a JSON file. And again, it's not important to write your own JSON data. Obviously, that was for just for example, but you can get it from an endpoint like this. And then we are going to use the templates. Again, why we use templates? In order to show data using mustache, this curly bracket thing. So you can use conjunctions like mustache. So this is the example. Let's say you are getting this data from the backend, which has number of items. Then it has different objects. This is the items array, and you have one item and second item. So the name of item is first is Alice, and then the other one is Bob for no reason. They are on sale. So to again cover up what M mustache is. So temp M mustache is like mustache is actually the way you actually put up data inside this Angular brackets. Why template is used? Good question. So that is what I'm explaining over here. So let's say you are getting some data that you want to open up inside your normal HTML, right? So can we use any other string? So no. Most templates and string is a different concept. Template is the way to actually print your string inside HTML to like explain in simple fashion. Yeah, to include dynamic data. Well done, Omkar. So that's the perfect explanation. So and you can place mustache variables inside attributes and tags, or just leak them on inside like normal HTML to print any data. So for this example, we will be using a component called as amp list. So amp list is a component that repeats the data like a repeater, so that you don't want to create, you just need to create one example of the item and then amp list repeats. So something like a e-commerce store landing page where you have multiple products listed over there. So then you also want to create fallbacks and placeholders. So for example, if the server doesn't takes like returns any data, or the user clicks on a wrong button, or there is no item that is available, so you want to display a fallback. So we'll also study about how fallbacks actually works. So this is a classic example of list. What we are doing in this list, we have created a width and height attribute so that our list looks functional, and then we have a layout in which we have fixed the height, and then we are getting this data from the SRC. So the SRC component actually attribute has to be used directly inside AMP list so that the data is stored temporarily inside the list. And this is the data placeholder that you will be using for the part time. So AMP automatically, when you include AMP list and then you have two divs which says anything like placeholders and fallback, AMP automatically recognizes that this is for placeholder for the time being until the data doesn't arrive. And then you have fallback, which automatically displays this data if the data returns an error or there is no complete data available from that endpoint. So this is an example. So with this example, let's create a video site like YouTube. Let's say you want to create a video site like, and you want to include different videos using the AMP YouTube icon. Sorry, AMP YouTube component. So some of you have already tried AMP YouTube inside your assignments that you were given. So we'll be using the same thing, and we'll also see how skeleton loading things. I'm not sure if I included skeleton loading or not. So let's see. Let's say that this is the sample data that is coming from the backend. So you have an items array, and then under items array, you have one object in which you have ID, IMG, title, creator, all the things that you want to show on your page. So what you will do, you will create your, first of all, you will create your own template because you want to repeat this template data inside the list. So we will create the whole template so the template is the single part in this case that you want to show as the video icon. So create a template in which design everything as per your demand, and also use the mustache thing to print whatever data you want to print from the backend. And then we will this is this now inside the template, then we will create a second section that we'll name the placeholder, and the placeholder in this case will be our lazy load. There is nothing much that you need to do in lazy load, just pull up this class and apply gray color to it. So what will happen is, meanwhile when the backend is loading information, your front end just shows gray boxes like this. So it looks like a cool lazy loading effect. So then what we want to do, that we want to get the data from the back end, we want to filter and sort them on the front end to show some cool effects, right? And we'll be using bindings with amp list to show that data that we just created inside the templates and show it on the screen. So here is our amp list. This is the first part that you would actually want to see. So amp list is what it is doing, that we are having a SRC variable that is getting the default products, and also we have created a template variable, like, sorry, the bindings of SRC, so that whenever the state of this SRC is changed depending upon any activity that happens over here, so that the URL also should change, like a different endpoint URL. Right now I think in this one we are using get request because all the variables are getting passed in the URL, and most of the time websites use get way of fetching the data. So to simply understand, this is your default URL and this is your fallback URL, which will be manipulated whenever the binding is changed. So SRC is the variable in this case, and we'll be passing these variables like category and sort, just right over here, category and sort. And then you have a template inside your amp list, and depending upon the data that is coming from the template, this template will repeat its content inside. So actually, let me see if there is a live example of, because this will be a cool thing to do. Ampest. Okay, we have a component named Ampest. Okay, so this is loading data from the backend. This is exactly the example that I was looking for. So let's go ahead and see what we have done in this one. So we have an amp list property, and we have applied some attributes. Is it the right one? No, this is the one that we actually want to see. So we have put a refresh list, and what this refresh list is doing, it is having a amp state button that changes that list, refreshes the whole list as soon as you taps on the button. And then you have this amp list property in which you have created one template, and then you have used the mustaches to print the variables inside it, and you have used an amp img where the URL SRC URL is getting backed by dynamic. Now you would be wondering that how this content is getting over here. So the amp list should have a SRC over here. Let's try to find. So this is the SRC URL, which might be getting some data from the endpoint. Okay, so this is the data. Let's try to open this endpoint. So this is the data that we are getting from the backend. So items, and then you have individual items inside that object. So to represent individual item, we have used a single template, and then this template automatically get repeats depending upon these items. Cool. So this is a live example of amp list. So let's create another kind of filterable product list, which we'll use like, in a normal e-commerce site, you would like to see, like for me, a budget savvy person like me, I always tap on from low to high, which gives me very bad data. How will it differentiate between get, post, and put? So by default, the list example that we are seeing is a get request. Post you will definitely like generally used for. I haven't seen any post example with amp yet, but I would try to find and send it to you. So the basic way to do that is using get, and that's it will see. So endpoint, it's the backend server actually recognizes the difference between get, post, and put, and by default we set send a get request. That's how it detects what is get, and if you put post, then only it will recognize if it's a post request. So let's put in, like we have already put a product.html page, and now we are going to move to the product.html page. And let's say that this is the example data that is coming from the backend server containing item, and then you have different objects inside the items array. So this is a selector. I guess this is for the filter for the product selection and order selection. And what we are doing in this, we are changing the state of amp state to the product that we are clicking on. Okay, category is equal, category should be event dot value. So whatever value of event will be reflecting from the select, it will be getting back. I think the snip code should also be available. This is the output of the list, how the output of the list should appear. So you have an amp list, you have a SRC, by default SRC, and then the SRC for the fallback, which should load the filtered result. Then you have a template, and then you have a single item inside templates that's showing data using mustache. Cool. So, it was a lot of load. I think today we covered the most advanced thing, and congratulations in following through. What we have learned, we started with building normal app pages using simple components, a simple page. Then we also see how to find different AMP components and how to use them in the project. Then we saw how you can handle different user interactions, which are events and actions. Then we saw how you can collect user input with web forms. And by the way, one of the person had a question about AMP forms, and we'll be looking into that example just after I complete the conclusion. And then we also see how you can create bindings from the state variables and change the data depending upon the state variables. And finally, we saw how you can get the data from the server and you can show them on your page. And what we built, if you followed me through, there were not enough, I think, examples, but most of them, were okay to like explain the concepts. So you had a navigation, a video and carousels. You also created a product listing and a subscription form. and what next. This is not the end of the whole AMP course. So keep learning with whatever you have seen over here. Go and try out more examples. For example, like create your own website which is fully built on AMP, and they will show a bolt icon on your AMP site, and I would personally congratulate you on doing that. It takes like I think 1 week or 2 weeks to do that. And let's say if our GitHub pages are already ranked on AMP or not after this thing, right? So also take the skills that you have created, and example of state and binding. I just showed the example of state and binding, right, in that calculator like thing in which plus was not working, but I can show you again, no problem. And share with whatever you have learned with your friends, show off about that, and that's the way to do it. So whenever you get